Be well read. Be well read. For those of you who might be first-time joiners of our group, I'm Deborah Garrard, founder and lead coach at Be Well, Serve Well. Be Well, Serve Well. It's a wellness initiative serving those who serve. That's you and that's me. I think we're all here to serve in some way. I'm always glad and grateful for this time that I have to share with you, and I appreciate that you've chosen to tune in, whether you're watching us live or you're circling back at a later time to watch the recording. Thanks for being with us. And I have a question to ask. I'm a little curious this week. I wonder if anyone who's been following along has bought any of the books that I've recommended. So I'm hoping that you'll do me a favor and that you'll comment. Place a comment in the comment section below and just let us know if you bought one, two, or even all of the books that I've shared. And if not, that's fine too. But here's what I want you to know. Mark and Donna, Story and Song, they're a great benefit and a support to our community, and they need our support too. So I hope if you're on the island that you'll stop by the shop, look for some of these books and other books. And if you're not on the island, if you're listening to us from other parts, I've got friends in North Carolina I know that are listening, and in some other places too, New Jersey, I think. If not, go online to their online shop. Don't go to Amazon for your literary needs. Let's support Story and Song, this independent bookstore that's allowing me to share with you. I'm really grateful for that. Bring these books into our homes, into our lives, into our wellness, and into our wholeness. Now, I came across a really delightful quote this week, and it reminded me of you and our time together, and I think you'll soon see why. A room without books is like a body without a soul. True. Very, very true. These are the words, ancient words, of Marcus Tullius Cicero, Roman statesman, lawyer, and scholar. He lived from 106 to 43 BC. That seems backwards to us, but it's actually correct. Greek philosophy and rhetoric went fully into Latin for the first time in the speeches, the letters, and the dialogues of Cicero, who was considered the greatest orator of the Roman Republic. It was through him that the thinkers of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment discovered the riches of classical rhetoric and philosophy. Good to know as we seek not only to nourish our bodies, but also our souls by being well read. Today, I'm really excited. One of my favorite books, Radical Remission, Surviving Cancer Against All Odds. If I could only recommend one book to you, my friends, this is that book. Now, I'm glad I can recommend a few others. But I literally beg people to read this book. Because if we are willing, and that is the key, if we are willing, it will change forever the way we view cancer. The New York Times bestseller is written by Dr. Kelly Turner, Radical Remission, Surviving Cancer Against All Odds. Now, during the month of October, even as we begin to see signs that Halloween is fast approaching, we also begin to see pink everywhere, right? It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I'm sure we both know too many women and men who face this diagnosis. And so this month we will see pink everywhere. Pink t-shirts, pink reusable grocery bags, pink ribbons, and more. All drawing our attention to raise our awareness and raise a few dollars. And yes, we will even see, with apologies to breast cancer survivors everywhere, those dreaded pink buckets of Kentucky Fried Chicken, sponsored by none other than Susan G. Komen. You know, the ones that Dr. Greger mentioned in his book, How Not to Die, that we talked about a few weeks ago. He would say, and I would agree, that one of the ways not to die is not to buy the bucket and not to eat the chicken. Now, the cancer survivors that Dr. Turner tells us about would agree too, but I'm getting way ahead of myself. Let's talk about Dr. Kelly just a minute. I always like for you to know our writers. Dr. Turner is a researcher, an author, and a lecturer in the field of integrative oncology. She's the founder of the Radical Remission Project. Over the years, she's focused her attention on radical remission stories. We'll talk in a minute about what she means by that. Dr. Turner is passionate about healing possibilities, and her interest in complementary medicine began in her undergraduate work at Harvard, and then it narrowed in focus as she studied for her PhD during graduate school. This book, Radical Remission, is in part a result of her dissertation work, which led her on a year-long trip around the world to 10 different countries, interviewing 50 healers and 20 cancer survivors. But her ongoing research, included in the book, has expanded to include interviews and analysis of more than 1,000 cases of what she describes and what each person she talked to agrees are radical remissions. Let's look at that phrase first. What is radical? The word radical comes from the word radix, meaning root. Something that is radical, it gets to the root of things. By definition, with regards to change or action, it's that which affects the fundamental nature of something, the root. What is radical is far-reaching, it's thorough, it's complete. And I would also add, in the realm of cancer, it's unexpected. She uses that word too, you'll see in just a minute. Dr. Turner is wise to begin her book by sharing her own personal experiences with cancer, as well as what she means by radical remission. And I quote, "A radical remission is any cancer that is statistically unexpected." There's that word. And those statistics vary depending on the cancer type, the stage, and the medical treatment that's recommended. Allow me to read for just a moment. In order to understand what radical remission is, it's helpful to think about what is considered standard or non-radical remission. A doctor expects cancer to go into remission if it is caught early enough and if it's one of the more treatable cancers. For example, if a woman is diagnosed with stage 1 breast cancer, she will be expected, statistically speaking, to be cancer-free for at least 5 years, as long as she completes the recommended medical treatment of surgery, chemotherapy, and/or radiation. However, if that same woman is diagnosed with stage 1 pancreatic cancer, there's only a 14% chance that she will be alive in 5 years, even if she completes all the recommended treatments. Now, Dr. Turner goes on to say, to be more specific, a radical remission occurs whenever a person's cancer goes away without using any conventional medicine, or a cancer patient tries conventional medicine, but the cancer doesn't go into remission, so they switch to alternative or complementary methods of healing, which do lead to a remission. Or, in the third case, a cancer patient uses conventional medicine and complementary methods at the same time in order to achieve and outlive a statistically dire prognosis, which she describes as any cancer with a less than 25% chance of 5-year survival. That last point is important. Dr. Turner is in no way encouraging her readers to discount, nor is she disparaging, nor am I, the treatments offered by Western medicine. As I've said before, we live on a lot of streets called us and them. We need both and. We need each other. Dr. Turner is careful in this way to honor the choices that each cancer survivor makes. Choices made in a swirl of overwhelming information and emotion. She's careful, too, to honor the work of doctors, many of whom read her book and reach out to thank her for taking time to investigate these radical remission cases, something doctors tell her they wish they had time to do. In her research, she asked the oncologists who are willing to meet with her if they've ever seen a case of radical remission. Again, a case that's statistically unexpected. Each one has answered yes, and each one has answered no when she follows up by asking, have you taken time to publish the case? Friends, this is one of the reasons that we're not familiar with these stories and with what is possible in the realm of healing cancer. Dr. Turner's book is an attempt to begin that good work, to share those stories, getting those stories of radical remission into the mainstream so that you and we know more than surgery, chemo, and radiation, so that we can add other healing modalities that are being used every day to bring about healing, deep and wide, radical remissions. Now, early in the book, Dr. Turner shares her personal exposure to cancer. First, as a child of 8, when her uncle died of leukemia, leaving her 9-year-old cousin fatherless and leaving her with a new knowledge. Quote, "That's when I learned that daddies could die of cancer," she writes. Not long after, when she was 14, a close friend was diagnosed with stomach cancer just after their 8th grade graduation. And her young friend died at the age of 16 after 2.5 long years of side effects and failing treatments. Again, she writes, "His death taught me that absolutely anyone could die of cancer at any time." These experiences, these personal experiences, laid the groundwork for her lifelong passion in research and integrative oncology, helping people heal physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, people specifically facing a cancer diagnosis and treatment, whether their own or that of a loved one. During her college years at Harvard, she chose to volunteer in the pediatric wing at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City, finding her calling as she played Monopoly with children while they had their intravenous chemotherapy treatment. This calling led to exploration, which led to discovery. And using qualitative research methods, she unearthed 75 different factors that impacted the healing journeys of radical remission cases, including physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual factors. Further analysis revealed 9 key factors that kept appearing over and over, factors that almost every survivor mentioned doing to help their cancer heal. Now, we're going to talk about some of those factors. I won't share them all. I want you to read the book, right? But I want you to be inspired by the healing steps that are possible and available to anyone facing a cancer diagnosis. First, a little bit about cancer. Now, in Western society and thought, we seek one thing that will cure each disease. Cancer patients, and perhaps their doctors too, understand cancer as a complex disease. Turner writes this: "We already know that cancer can be caused by toxins or virus, bacteria, genetic mutation, or cellular breakdown. What makes this already complex disease even more multifaceted is the fact that the state of an individual's body, mind, and spirit system plays a pivotal role in whether or not toxins get removed from the body quickly, whether viruses and bacteria are allowed to take root, genes mutate, or cells break down. This wonderful, complex reality of our individuality. Radical remission survivors constantly remind me," she writes, "that no two people on this planet are the same, and therefore no two prescriptions for health will be the same either." One of the underlying beliefs that most of the research subjects shared with Turner is this, quote, "To get rid of disease, to get rid of cancer, you must change the conditions under which it thrives." Now, Turner goes on to use an analogy that I confess I've borrowed ever since I read it the first time in her book. It's the analogy of the moldy basement. And I'm just going to read this to you. It's quite amazing to me, and it's apropos. Imagine going into your basement and finding mold everywhere, just as a surgeon might open up a person's body and find cancer everywhere. One strategy to get rid of the mold is to bleach the entire basement, which will certainly kill the mold. This is similar to chemotherapy and radiation, which are both strong interventions that kill cancer cells. To continue the analogy, imagine that the bleach has worked and there's now no more mold left in your basement and no more cancer left in your body. Now your doctor says that all you need to do is hope it won't come back. The issue with this scenario is that the mold in your basement is destined to grow back. as long as the conditions under which mold grows still exist, darkness and dampness. However, if you were bringing in UV lights into your basement and constantly run a fan or dehumidifier, then the mold would not grow back. This is the main idea behind changing the conditions under which cancer thrives. And you'll notice that all 9 factors in the book work toward this goal. The only catch is that the changes must be permanent. Otherwise, the minute you stop the fan, the dehumidifier, the UV light, the old conditions will return and mold will once again grow. In changing the environment of our moldy basements, it's interesting to me that only 2 of the 9 factors are physical in nature. Let's begin there, because to me these are sort of low-hanging fruit among the factors that Dr. Turner discovered. These physical factors include radically changing your diet, probably no surprise there, and also including targeted herbs and supplements. Brendan was diagnosed with advanced stomach cancer at the age of 48. He figured his time was up and didn't want to experience the painful side effects that he'd watched others go through in treatment, so he refused all conventional approaches. His doctors told him if he refused treatment, he wouldn't see the new year. Now, Brendan had some other ideas, and he began instead to read, and he discovered this complex combination of things that he could do to heal. Among them, taking supplements which he found would boost his immune system in such a way as to identify and remove those cancerous cells. At the writing of this book, this 48-year-old had not only seen the next New Year, he'd seen 6 more New Years. Chris Wark is another radical remission survivor who used both radically changing his diet and targeted herbs and supplements, among other factors, when diagnosed at the age of 26 with stage 3 colon cancer. Chris was immediately rushed into surgery, where a portion of his colon and a very large tumor were removed. When he woke up, he was offered a sloppy Joe for dinner. Chris kind of scratched his head. What? Sloppy Joe, colon cancer? I don't think so. When he was offered chemotherapy in the weeks to come, he scratched his head again. He'd been thinking. He refused further conventional treatments, and his doctors told him he was, quote, insane. Nevertheless, Chris moved forward with his own plan, and he trusted his intuition, another one of the factors that Turner discusses. And he began to radically change his diet and lifestyle, removing all things toxic, processed foods, animal foods, fried foods, choosing instead to literally load up on whole, real, fresh foods. Now, Chris is one of the radical remission survivors I've been following ever since I read about him in Dr. Turner's book several years ago. He drank so much carrot juice that he turned orange, and there are pictures on his website to prove that. But he healed, fully and completely. Now in his mid-40s, father of 2 beautiful girls, Chris Wark offers a great example of radical remission, living his life to help others heal in the ways that he found healing was possible. You can check Chris out at chrisbeatcancer.org. Now, I mentioned another factor that played a role in the radical remission that Chris experienced, following your intuition. Dr. Turner found that this factor, too, was key to each of the cases she discovered in her research. Now, again, these cases are of remission that is statistically unexpected. Introducing this factor, Dr. Turner outlines the discovery scientists have made that over 100 million neurons, the type of cells in our brains, also exist inside the human digestive tract. That's why we talk about trusting our gut, having a gut feeling, feeling butterflies. We are indeed a complex system, fearfully and wonderfully made. Perhaps this complex system explains the countless tests that Susan Keller endured prior to her diagnosis. That diagnosis was this: late-stage pancreatic cancer with metastases to the lungs. It was a persistent cough that initially led Susan to her doctor, who began by giving her cough suppressants and an antibiotic, of course. Well, 6 weeks later, the cough was persisting, and she was now experiencing discomfort on her right side, behind and beneath her rib cage. chest x-ray, CAT scan, lung specialist, colonoscopy, endoscopy, abdominal ultrasound, and finally, a whole body PET scan. And finally, 2, that diagnosis. Again, late stage pancreatic cancer with metastases to the lungs. Susan describes that experience like this. At that diagnosis, I was sitting on the examination table, and are you ready for this? I heard a little voice in my head, and she laughs. I'd never heard voices before, but I heard a voice that said, not that way, not this time. My doctor told me that the diagnosis was very serious and that I needed to follow his exact rules and guidelines in order to get myself better. If not, I didn't have a good prognosis. I smiled then, because a yoga teacher had once told me that if you smile, you can sense danger 50 feet away. The smile incensed the doctor, she says, at which point he became more verbose and more authoritarian. That's when I knew that the danger was there, in that diagnosis, in that office. I never told him that I was not going to do what he recommended. I simply slipped off the table and left the office. Somehow, in those first days, she had the confidence in her own intuition and in her strong will to live, another factor that's noted in the book. To begin making radical changes in her life, she talked to her boss and reduced her hours at work. She began healing by radically changing her diet to an alkalizing diet, reducing overall inflammation in her body. She says she read everything she could, gathered all the information she needed, and she got to work. And friends, she healed. In addition to removing toxic foods, Susan stepped away from toxic relationships. There were people, of course, unsupportive of her chosen path, and she knew their negative energy, well-intended as it might have been, would not help her heal, especially as they said to her, "We don't want to watch you die." Now, ironically, this is how she now describes her life. I feel great. I love my life, everything. I'm like the classic patient who says, a cancer diagnosis changed my life. The diagnosis was simply an opportunity for me to kind of take a step back, to look at life differently and say, okay, what's next? In answer to that question, what's next, Susan has begun, like Chris, helping other people find their own unique paths to healing from cancer. And she has far outlived her doctor's dire prognosis of being gone in less than a year. Now, you know as well as I do, there are certain words and phrases we often hear. Pancreatic cancer is one of them, that we, conditioned by experience and the messages of society, translate into the word incurable. I truly hope this story of radical remission begins to change how you and I think about this particular cancer and others. It's not ironic to me that even this morning I heard the story of another person diagnosed with stage 4, late stage, pancreatic cancer, sent home into hospice care. Yes, Susan's story is just one story, but it is not to be discounted. Her life matters, in part because Dr. Turner is very thorough. She's intentional in outlining the science behind why each one of these factors is effective. In addition to the factors of radically changing your diet, using herbs and supplements, following your intuition, Dr. Turner discovered that each of the radical remission cases were people who also intentionally chose to increase positive emotions. Now, Dr. Turner outlines 3 types of love when talking of positive emotions, and each type represents one of the 9 key factors she discovered that led to radical remissions. First, there's a love within each of us, a love we give ourselves if we learn how, that is then projected into the world. This love shows up in several factors she details, including following your own intuition and taking control of your health. Second, there's the love that we receive. This factor she calls embracing social support. The support might be there, but are we willing to embrace it, to receive it? And third is an unconditional spiritual type of love that connects us to all three, something within us and beyond us, something oh so powerful to heal. Efrat Livni, diagnosed with stage 3C ovarian cancer, offers us a great example of the first kind of love. Now, her approach might surprise you. It might actually confound you. We'll see. From the very early stages of my cancer journey, it was clear to me that I would not declare battle, but rather find ways to accept and befriend this new and unexpected chapter in my life. I knew that in order to do so, what I needed most was to find gratitude, joy, and fun in my life, as often and as much as I was able to. She even bought, I love this, a pair of purple Converse high tops to wear to her chemo treatments. She said they would keep her spirits high and make her smile. My hunch is they made a few other people smile too. At the writing of this book in 2014, Efrat had lived 12 years healing fully from her stage 3C ovarian cancer. Now, Turner describes positive emotions as rocket fuel for our immune systems. Here's what she says. Whenever we feel the emotions of love, joy, and happiness, the glands in our brains release a surge of healing hormones into our bloodstreams. We know these. Serotonin, relaxin, oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins. And these hormones immediately communicate with our cells, telling our bodies to begin lowering our blood pressure, lowering our heart rate, improving blood circulation, getting more oxygen to the cells, digesting our food more slowly so that we can absorb more nutrients, increasing white and red blood cell activity, and more. One of the spiritual teachers and healers that Dr. Turner studied from Hawaii was named Morali, who helps us understand the difference between a Western approach to cancer and a more Eastern or holistic approach that includes the power of these positive emotions. Both Western and Eastern medicine agree that cancer cells are damaged cells, either by toxin, virus, bacteria, gene mutation. We talked about this earlier. While Western medicine believes these cells are beyond repair, a more holistic approach believes the body can repair and heal these cells and return them to their natural, healthy state. This is the theory behind the key factor of increasing positive emotions. Now, one more story Turner shares perfectly reflects the healing power of positive emotions. And I just want to read a portion of this story. In 1993, Sarah Ann Rothberg was 29 years old and in absolute love with her first child, a beautiful newborn girl named L'Oreal. Despite this new joy, Sarah Ann was dealing with many stressors in her life, including a strained marriage, a blind mother, an elderly father, and a grandmother who had recently fallen ill, all while Sarah Ann was working as a television consultant. During this time, she was also dealing with what doctors believe was just a breast infection from breastfeeding. Over the next few years, Sarah Ann endured the death of her mother and her grandmother, as well as an emotionally painful divorce, all the while dealing with and having little time, though, to focus on this breast infection that was making her feel worse every day. In 1999, after seeing 11 different doctors in 6 years, Sarah Ann was finally given the correct diagnosis. You know what's coming. It was a malignant breast tumor, not a breast infection. At first, her doctors told her it was likely stage 2 breast cancer and there was no apparent lymph node involvement. However, further testing soon revealed the worst possible scenario. It was actually stage 4 breast cancer, and it had not only spread to her lymph nodes, but also formed small metastases above and under her aorta, and possibly on her neck and spine. Sarah Ann was no doubt terrified. It was Friday and she couldn't see the new oncologist until Monday. How would she face her 5-year-old daughter all weekend long, feeling overwhelmed by this news? And then she remembered. She remembered reading about Norman Cousins. Perhaps some of you know this story. Norm wrote a book called Anatomy of an Illness in which he recounts his own healing experience, healing from a life-threatening illness through the power of laughter. And so on her way home, Sarah Ann stopped at the video store, pre-Netflix, and bought every comedy tape that they had. Once at home, she quickly fed, bathed, and tucked her 5-year-old daughter into bed, closing the door behind her and bursting into uncontrollable sobs. Questions swirled in her head, and then she remembered the videos. She put them in, began to watch, crying for a while, then tears turning to laughter, as she kept repeating, "It worked for Norman Cousins. Maybe it can work for me. It worked for Norman Cousins. Maybe it can work for me." Both the tears and the laughter were cathartic. It wasn't long before she made a play date with her daughter. They would laugh together every day, twice a day. Her daughter liked that. It wasn't long before she underwent surgery and began chemotherapy, complete with throwing herself a chemo comedy party. And it wasn't long until she began the Comedy Cures Foundation, bringing joy and laughter and a reframing of this medical diagnosis, breast cancer, to countless others. It wasn't long before Sarah Ann was saying this. I really looked at it as I wouldn't have gotten cancer unless I was supposed to see something or help the world in a way that I would never be able to if I wasn't put in that situation. So instead of ever saying, "Why me?" I actually always said, "Okay, I'm listening. What am I supposed to learn here? Or what am I supposed to teach here? How is my cancer journey supposed to help make the world better?" Wow. And this. If I look at this as a wake-up call to focus my vision somewhere, then I don't need to die. I just need to meet the call. Now, I looked up comedy cures. Oh my goodness. Sarah Ann's energy jumps off the page. I hope you'll look it up too. She's not only surviving, she's thriving. And she's inspiring others to do the exact same thing now 21 years after her diagnosis with stage 4 breast cancer that had metastasized, as I mentioned. She's even scheduled to speak at the Vatican in 2021. I certainly hope she gets to go. I share Sarah Ann's story to honor you. If you are facing a breast cancer diagnosis, or if you love someone who is, or if you're one of the countless survivors, women and men who have survived a breast cancer diagnosis. If you've heard those words, you have cancer, you have breast cancer. It's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I hope this story, this powerful radical remission story, has raised your awareness of what is possible, all that is possible, if we are willing. There it is again, one of the keys, to radically change our diets, to use herbs and supplements, to trust ourselves and our intuition, to increase positive emotions. These are just a few of the 9 factors that Dr. Turner shares in this powerful book. Dr. Turner also discusses why cancer never appears in our heart or small intestine. Are you curious? Read the book. Dr. Turner discusses how birds singing in the early morning air and a love of music helped Shin, a Japanese businessman well known in his country, not only to heal from advanced stage kidney cancer, but to live over 25 years at the writing of her book. Past the time he was released from the hospital into hospice care, with doctors expecting he would die within 1 to 3 months. If you're curious about the connection between music, oxygen, and healing, I hope you'll read the book. This particular story is one of my favorites. It's fascinating. Now, she also discusses, as well as she might, the very real fear that accompanies any cancer diagnosis. Fear of death, fear of treatment, fear of side effects. Fear is powerful. Fear is powerful. She tells a story that I often share about a study in which researchers were testing a new chemotherapy drug. Cancer patients were randomized into two groups, with one being given the chemotherapy treatment and another group being given a placebo. And as you probably know, in a randomized study, neither group knows what they're receiving. Interestingly, amazingly, 30% of those receiving the placebo lost their hair because they thought they would. To quote Turner, their intense fear of having a side effect caused their body to produce that side effect, even though they weren't getting any chemotherapy. Fear is powerful. Stepping past our fear, taking control of our health, reclaiming our health is powerful too. That's another of the key factors. Now, if you're still thinking that these are just anomalies, Turner's got an answer for that too. She shares this. Throughout history, studying anomalies has led to many important discoveries, including penicillin, the X-ray, and the pacemaker. When it comes to the anomaly of radical remission, she writes, studying such extraordinary healing cases gives us insights into the body's self-healing capabilities. Simply knowing that a person with stage 4 cancer can become cancer-free without using chemotherapy, radiation, or surgery always leaves me, she writes, in awe of the body's incredible healing potential. I hope you're a little bit in awe, too, of these stories that I've shared. I've never heard the words, "Deborah, you have cancer." But like you, I know plenty of people who have. My aunt died of cancer in the 60s, and I learned that mommies can die of cancer, leaving my cousins without their mother. And then my cousin, her daughter, died of cancer at the age of 37, leaving her 2 children motherless. Children who now have children of their own. I share this book with you and with them and with anyone who is willing to listen, to read, to heal. Not just to heal from cancer, but to heal the way we think about cancer. I hope you'll read it and share it too. Chris Carr is one of my sheroes. Chris lives with an inoperable cancer. And when I say lives, I mean lives in capital letters. 17 years and counting after diagnosis, she doesn't consider herself a cancer survivor. No. She considers herself a cancer thriver. That can be you too. It can be a loved one. It can be a family member, a friend. Chris says this, quote, "The challenge arises when we let the familiar stand in the way of the possible." I want to repeat that. The challenge arises when we let the familiar stand in the way of the possible. We know what is familiar in a cancer diagnosis. Not only surgery, but also chemo and radiation. These are familiar. Fear is familiar, too familiar. Now, though, you've heard just a fraction of what is possible, and I am not shy in begging you to read this book. If I could encourage you to read only one book about wellness and wholeness, healing and hope, this is that book. It has the power to change the way we think. It has the power to lead us beyond the familiar, opening up a world of possibilities. I truly hope that you will. Now we're back to Cicero, who also said this, "Where there is life, there's hope." I agree. Dr. Kelly Turner does too. And next time, we're going to talk about her work, Radical Hope. It's another twist in her radical message, sharing not only healing stories of cancer, but also prevalent diseases like Alzheimer's, MS, and more. I hope you'll join us as together we do this radical thing, getting to the root of the matter, finding the soul in our bodies by filling our rooms and our homes with books. seeking not only to be well read, but to be well and to serve well. I thank you for joining along. I thank Connor, who's behind the scenes making all this possible as I come to you today from Atlanta, not from Fernandina. It's always a blessing to be with you. Be well and serve well, my friends, and I'll see you in just a couple of weeks. Take good care.